Okay, just in case I forget, remember Scalito, okay, Supreme Court judge who died in El Paso, Texas. Okay, this is Diesel We the People News. One more time at educational purposes only. Not attorney, not giving legal advice. Okay? Just my opinion at times. Most of the time. Some of the time. Alright, never look straight forward. Always look around and be able to protect yourself by any means necessary. Alright, arm yourself with knowledge. Use that Second Amendment. Okay? So this is the Eddie Craig. And I had a discussion, small one, but a discussion on YouTube to a guy on one of the Harvey channels, Court Watchers and all that. Okay, Scalito actually wrote a book, and I highly suggest you guys get that. And it's called Statutory Construction. Okay, it kind of goes through there. You got to break down the statutes and all that, and even him say most attorneys don't know how to do it, and in fact, most judges don't know how to do it. But he didn't finish up with that. The reason why they don't really know how to do it is because we all assume by reading it, we know what it means. Okay? And, but when you get down to the statutory construction, it's breaking down words and find out what particular words mean what in that particular statute. So you guys heard me talked about 1,000 times that you got to grab here, you got to grab there, you got to grab here, and then you got to grab over there. Okay? Well, Eddie is one of the better ones to actually sit down and pick your brain about that. Really break it down pretty good. Okay? But let's go ahead and start proceeding forward. There's going to be a couple of videos. Okay? Part 1, Part 2, as far as I know. Okay? Unless I yap too much. But his YouTube channel is well, this is off the High Frequency Radio that did a mirror of Eddie Craig's on it. Okay, and Eddie Craig is a transportation guru here in the state of Texas. All right, and the reason why he's a guru is because he actually goes through the statutes and breaks them down. So you could probably find it on let's see here, right here, or maybe you can find it on YouTube about it. But it's about 2.5 hours long because he really digs deep in it. So if you want to check it out, again, go to a High Frequency Radio and look for this. And go about a year back. It's former Deputy Sheriff Eddie Craig explains the transportation laws, which is what he's doing is statutory construction. Okay, and this is for everything. Your tax code. Okay, commerce codes, all these other type of codes, statutes. All right.
Material we're going to have today. Now, my area of expertise is Texas transportation law and legal due process under the Code of Criminal Procedure, which is where they designate transportation offenses to be, is actually criminal offenses. Now, when you study the Texas law on this subject, you come to the conclusion that they're sending mixed messages in the statutes. According to who is in charge of enforcing these, traffic citations are administrative because they are enforced first and foremost by the Texas Department of Public Safety, which is defined in the Texas Transportation Code as of the department that's in charge of any chapter in the Transportation Code relevant to enforcement. The DPS, as they're known for short, is also a state administrative agency under Title 37 of the Texas Administrative Code. And when you go through Title 37 and break it down, it says very clearly that only certain offenses that occur within the Transportation Code are relevant to judicial courts. All others are administrative and should be going through the State Office of Administrative Hearings, but they're not. Now, under the State Administrative Procedures Act, which is Chapter 2001 of the Government Code, it very clearly states that the courts are not state administrative agencies, and therefore they lack any authority whatsoever regarding those particular cases that are subject to the Texas Administrative Code under the authority of the Department of Public Safety when they're not one of the exceptions to the rule that's designated there. While those exceptions can be charged and prosecuted in a criminal fashion, the remainder of them are administrative in nature. And that is the majority of the alleged offenses that most people in Texas run afoul of, if they're capable of running afoul of it. Now, part of what we're going to learn here is what transportation is and what transportation isn't. Right now, we're led to believe that transportation is anyone in a car on the road. And that's simply not true. In the case of transportation, when they try to charge you with a crime as violations of those offenses, what we run into is what is a crime and what isn't a crime. Under what is known as the common law version of law, which is what this country is founded on, the common law of Old England, and it was adapted and everything to how the American system of justice and the rights of the people was set up to function. So it's not the same common law that existed in England, but the majority of it, as far as rights, principles, and moral ethics of law, was fully incorporated and indoctrinated into what we have here for our law. Most people don't realize the difference in that, but that's where it's from. You have common law basis for what occurs, and then you have statutory law. They are not the same thing. Though under common sense, the statutory law can't violate the common law principles, you're going to see in what we look at today that that is very much untrue in the way the law is being applied and written nowadays. It most assuredly runs afoul of common law principles, and I'm going to show you the proof of that as we go through this. Now, under common law, an actual crime is defined in this way. What you have is called malum in se, a wrong in itself, an act or case involving illegality from the very nature of the transaction upon principles of natural, moral, and public law. For example, fraud in and of itself is wrong. To defraud somebody out of money, property, or anything else is inherently morally wrong. Murder, inherently morally wrong. Theft, inherently morally wrong. Those are malum in se crimes. Those are the crimes that common law dealt with so studiously and efficiently at the time of its existence, when it was allowed to function the way it was intended. An act is said to be malum in se when it is inherently and essentially evil, that is, immoral in its nature and injurious in its consequences, without any regard to the fact of its being noticed or punished by the law of the state. Such are most or all of the offenses cognizable at common law without the denouncement of a statute, as murder, larceny, etc., compared to malum prohibitum. Now, malum prohibitum is the statutory means of declaring something illegal or unlawful simply because there's a law that says it is, not because there is necessarily any harm or injury that occurred because of it. For instance, when a city ordinance says they can fine you to keep off the grass, no one is injured by you being on the grass. It is simply malum prohibitum because some city manager decided to make it an ordinance that said you can't do it, even though there is no injured party and there is no intent to commit an actual criminal offense. When you have intent, that's when we get into mens rea, which is the bottom portion of this here. When we're talking about mens rea as an element of criminal responsibility, a guilty mind, a guilty or wrongful purpose, a criminal intent, guilty knowledge, and willfulness. That, folks, is part of what it has always taken to commit an actual crime. The desire to commit that crime, the intent, the willingness to commit that crime and cause that harm to another person or their property.
For instance, let's just say that um, somebody borrowed my car and there was drugs underneath my seat, right? I didn't know about it, but then all of a sudden I get pulled over and officers found the drugs in there. Well, that was not intent. And I did not commit that crime. Right? Now, obviously, I would have to go through there and prove it because, well, you're guilty until proven innocent. Right? But that's what it is. They're supposed to, uh, the most likelihood if it was on your uh, person, your body, of your clothing or whatever, then you can maybe follow through with the intent, providing there's not no clear justification for that, but just simply underneath the seat. Okay, well, I have 10 people drive my car. Okay, so how does that apply to me?
These malum prohibitum statutes have gotten so far out of hand that basically they're declaring anything and everything that we the people do as illegal, simply because someone doesn't like it. And it doesn't matter whether there's an actual injury or not. They simply want us to believe that it's wrong because a small group of people decided to petition a smaller group of people to ask for permission to have it declared illegal for someone to do this thing. That's basically where we find ourselves. The majority of our law is no longer malum inse, it's malum prohibitum. And because of that, they are prohibiting virtually everything that we have done in our lives since America began. They have criminalized virtually every aspect of American life. You see it when they raid a location that sells raw milk, for example. You see it when Monsanto is allowed to go out and poison our food genetically and so on and so forth. And the only people being prohibited from doing anything are those that are not the big money corporations such as you and I. Basically, we are now under the thumb of corporate welfare in more ways than one, whether it be actual for-profit corporations or it be the state operating as a for-profit corporation in its own self. So, that being said, we need to understand what an actual crime is versus what a malum prohibitum alleged crime is. This is what brings us into the areas of transportation, which is one of my main areas of expertise. Now, when we get to transportation, we're going to get to some definitions when we go through this. And there's some things you need to understand about reading and understanding statutes when you begin to research this on your own. Terminology in relation to statutes is extremely important. Everything about statutory language is a gotcha clause. And 4.6 here, this gotcha of terminology, the compound definition, is one of the key ways of understanding how this system is set up to function. Semantics in regards to transportation enforcement is extremely important. Everything is about the language. Everything is about the definitions in the language. So that being said, one of the first things you have to pay attention to is what I refer to as a compound definition. A compound definition can be hard to spot it when you don't know what you're looking for. But basically speaking, a compound definition is any definition that contains one or more terms or phrases that itself has its own separate definition elsewhere.
And that's what I was talking about, right? Your tax code, when you read it, you assume it applies to you. But when you break it down like what he's just now saying, it does not, and it absolutely cannot apply to you. But you have to break it down in such deals. And these magistrates may not even know this because everybody just complies, because everybody's ignorant of the way it's written. Okay? Even the cops, like the judge says, most attorneys don't even know how to do it. So,
now, one of those primary examples when we move down to the next portion of this is you're going to see commercial motor vehicle. Notice that means a motor vehicle. Well, right here we have a problem. You have a definition that uses the same terms as a part of its definition. Right there we have something that isn't defined. You're trying to use the term being defined as a part of the definition. Then you say, when you read this, means a motor vehicle other than a motorcycle designed or used primarily to transport property. Now, another way I used to talk about this in my seminar material, and this is an excerpt from the book that I have in that seminar material, is these are what I refer to as rabbit trails. In this, there are multiple rabbit trails that you need to look at. For instance, commercial is a rabbit trail. Motor vehicle is a rabbit trail. Vehicle is a rabbit trail. Transport is a rabbit trail. Property is a rabbit trail. Passenger and passenger car itself is a separate rabbit trail. This, folks, is why statutory law is so hard to understand. And one of the things you'll notice most is that when you see a word or phrase in a statute, the worst mistake you can make is to believe you understand that statute. When you recognize that word or phrase and assume that it means the same thing in the statute that it does in common English that you're familiar with, that will always be a mistake. And here's why.
All right, we're going to go with part 2. Decent We the People News.